Have you wondered what financial advisors actually think about finances? This is your sneak peek at the conversations within Financial Design Studio. Michelle Smallenberger, the CEO here, will be your host as you go behind the designs.
All right, welcome back to the podcast. Today we have a really fun episode for you. So Trevor on our team was last in on the podcast in episode 24, which was right before their adoption. And this journey has been years in the process, and many of you have followed along. Family is something that's really important to each of us in this firm, so we wanted to take an episode to update you all and celebrate the Meyer family together. They also have a lot of wisdom and experience to share with others in the adoption process. So today we are going to hear their story. And we have Trevor from our team and his wife, Courtney. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
Yeah. So what's funny about this is I know Trevor prefers to be more behind the scenes, so doesn't like to be in the spotlight. Courtney, do you as well?
I do not either.
So both of them have thankfully been willing to do this episode. And I'm hoping that this just kind of serves as like a reminder of things because you just got back. So it's been, 2 weeks?
I think about 3.
Yeah, we're about 3 weeks now.
Okay, 3 weeks back from actually traveling to pick Aiden up, your son, your new son. And so we kind of want to capture like some of these little stories, kind of like, right after you go on vacation and something like this that's meaningful. There's a lot of things that you just forget over time. Yeah. So I'm hoping this kind of serves as just like that, something you can go back and listen to, but also a way to tell people, update them, kind of in one fell swoop instead of, telling everyone at different times. So This is going to be really fun. Plus, I'm really excited to hear like a lot of the specifics. So, All right. So tell us, let's kind of go back to the beginning, kind of even like maybe how you guys met, what made you want to start adoption. I'll just kind of let you guys share a little bit about yourselves first.
All right. Well, we're going to go way, way back. So before I met Trevor, way before I met Trevor, I felt like God put on my heart when I was 16 years old to adopt from Africa. I could not have told you that Burundi was going to be the country, but I knew Africa was just where he was calling me to adopt from. And then we met, I don't even know, 11 years later, I think, maybe. Wow. And then we met playing soccer. And when Trev and I started dating, this is kind of a funny story I like to tell. I always wanted to have a kid and adopt a kid. And Trevor's like, well, I want to have 2 biological kids. So I was like, okay, well, then we'll adopt siblings. So we went from 2 to 4 kids in about a 5-second conversation, which escalated really quickly. And then when we actually got around, and I had told him adoption for me was a non-negotiable. I said, you're either on board or you could just go and like we could just be done here. Mm-hmm. So when we got around to actually talking about having kids, we had our first son. And then we got around to talking about starting to have another one. Trevor was kind of like, I've done some thinking and I think I'm good to just adopt one and be done. And I probably asked him for about 3 weeks if he was sure. If I didn't have to have another kid, I did not want to get on board with that. So that's kind of how we got there. I don't know if you want to add anything to that story, but
yeah, I mean, the thing I would probably add is I'm pretty sure we talked about it when, if it wasn't our first date, it would have been like our second or third date. Because it was really important to you. Mm-hmm. And it was one of those things that say, hey, if this is going to go anywhere, it's really important that we're both on the same page because otherwise we're wasting time. So I always thought that was interesting. I always respected you a lot for that, being really upfront and direct about it. And we can go through the process of how we even narrowed into Burundi because that's kind of a funny story in and of itself. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so once we decided that we were going to adopt, I think I started looking at Bo's crazy enough. Bo's our oldest son, is crazy enough. And like, okay, if we have another child like Bo, that's going to be a lot of energy running around. So let's trim it down to 2. And I think we decided that we can de-escalate things from 4 down to 2. So
yeah. Okay, so Bo had a lot of energy. Does Aiden have a lot of energy? Did you get less energy?
We got less energy. He definitely does not match Bo. Aiden is very much an observer. He's very much a 2.5-year-old toddler. Don't get me wrong with that. He likes to run around and be silly and giggle, and he's mischievous and I think likes to get into things. But no, Bo is very, very high energy, and so he's very much an observer. You can kind of tell he likes to sit back and watch and kind of see what's going on. He seems like he's very much a checking out the character of people kind of kid, and Bo is a very much, I don't know who you are and I don't care, can I have a hug? Like, we got the 2 opposite kids, but I think that God knew we needed two opposite
Yes.
kids.
Yeah. Trevor, walk us through a little bit, just to explain kind of what that's like. So Courtney wanted to adopt. That wasn't, necessarily on your radar at that point.
Yeah.
Walk us through just kind of your thinking of how did you get on board?
So honestly, I was really just interested in Courtney.
Fair.
It's one of those things to say, I really enjoyed spending time with you. I didn't want to stop spending time with you. And as I kind of thought through it and evaluated it, I was like, I'm not opposed to this one way, shape, or form. And eventually, as we started talking through it more, because it took us years to, one, even have our first child, but then two, to say, hey, we're ready to step into this from a adoption perspective. We're talking many, many years. So as you think through it and you evaluate, it's like, hey, I can be on board with this. And then by the time we said, hey, we're going to hit go and let's go in after this process, I was like, yeah, absolutely. Like her enthusiasm and excitement for wanting to adopt, spilled over into me. I'm like, absolutely. I can't wait to do this. Like this, I need to do this as well.
Yeah.
So,
No, that's great.
I think one of the things that I always mention to people that are considering adopting is, it is critically important that you know that you are called to do it, because it's a hard process. It's long, it's frustrating, but the joys, at least for us, in being able to come home with Aiden are far and away more than anything what it costs to do, whether that's financial, emotional, time, any of that stuff. So for us, it was absolutely the right call, but I do recommend to everybody, make sure it's absolutely exactly what you're being called to do.
And would you both say that once you get into the process, I mean, the paperwork and all the pieces that we've just kind of watched you go through, you'll find out pretty quickly if this is absolutely something you want to do, because all of those steps can deter you pretty easily?
I think so. We have, there's a Facebook page that we both follow that are people that have adopted from Burundi, which is the country that Aiden is from. And you see on there people's frustration come out a lot, especially with the waiting times. Unfortunately, here in the U.S., we can't see what's being done on the back end, so for us specifically in Burundi, and that's, I'm sure every other country that people are adopting from as well. But you definitely see people's frustration. You can see people being like, this wait is ridiculous. Like, this is so long. And it can be just a matter of moments of one document that doesn't go through that prolongs your time that you're continuing to wait.
Yep.
So I feel like from what we see, the people that are on there are people that are fully invested in adopting, they're already in the process. So we haven't really gotten to see the people that have started and been like, hey, this is not for me. But I do feel like that people probably get into it and they realize either hey, I think I could give this a go, even if it's going to take a long time and we're going to hit a lot of bumps along the way. I think that if you really weren't invested in it, I think it would be easily to be like, yeah, you know what, I'm good. This is a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of investing, and I just don't think it's for me. So,
yeah, I think the one thing I will add is, even though the paperwork is long and strenuous and hard and confusing, while it's really frustrating for me that's a reason people say no and bow out of the process. Going through the process and being able to bring Aiden home has reignited a fire for me to say, if we have clients, and we have clients that are going through the adoption process, but if we have clients, or even if you're not a client, even if you're just listening to this happenstance and, hey, I might be interested in this and that, and you want help going through the paperwork process, I am more than happy. I will sit down with you. I will walk you through everything that I learned from my experience, because I never want the paperwork process to be the reason why you don't come home with a child. It's too important to let paperwork be the thing. And even though paperwork is critically important, it's really important to get all the paperwork the way it needs to be done. But because of how frustrating it is, I don't want that to be a reason people bow out. So
yeah, no, that's helpful. And we've talked about I know, Trevor, we've talked about some of the importance of having barriers to kind of make it hard enough, but not too hard, and this fine balance, because there are kids who need loving homes. And so it's kind of this fine balance, but also wanting to make sure that the homes are going to are loving homes. And so I'm sure that's, there's kind of this fine balance. And so you experience that firsthand. Walk us through, I guess, just explain kind of just how you started. So there's choices you have to make, right? Between you have a home study, you have all these different steps. So kind of start to walk us through just what that timeline of pieces looks like?
Yeah, I think for us, it started at the end of 2019, start of 2020. And as we know, that's happenstance, so right timing to start with COVID. So COVID in itself, and I hate to use that as an excuse, but it does really upend things, right? Just processes changed. A lot of things just stopped working the way that they were used to. But 2019, 2020 is when we basically kind of locked into when we were going to do it. The funny story that I like, at least just because it's process, is, Courtney always knew it was from Africa, and I was on board with that. Well, I don't know what countries are good or which countries are not good to adopt from. So I said, okay, let's pull out literally a map of Africa, and we're going to go country by country. And we agreed on 3 set criteria. Our first criteria was, are we even eligible to adopt from Africa? Surprisingly, or be able to adopt from that country. Surprisingly, lots of countries, basically, we're not eligible to adopt. Either you have to have that country's heritage, or they just don't have an adoption program. So that actually filtered out a lot of them. Our criteria number 2 was we didn't want to travel to any level 4, which is a determination from the State Department to say, hey, this is a country you really should not be traveling to. My parents are extensive travelers and whatnot, and have been to many level 4 countries. But we knew that we wanted to bring our older son Bo with us, and we just didn't feel comfortable saying, hey, we're not going to go to this country with our young son. So that was a determinant, and that excluded some. But then the final determinant was, does their adoption program have 12 adoptions for the last 3 years?
Okay.
And what we were essentially looking for there is to say, do they have an established program in place that said, okay, at least roughly speaking, 1 a month is happening for 3 years.
Yeah.
So that way it's not, hey, this is a brand new program, we're figuring everything out, so everything's hit or miss, and that. That was the intentionality, and that's how we kind of narrowed it down, and actually narrowed us down to 2 countries, 1 Burundi and 2 Liberia. So I said, okay, fine, now let's go figure out every single agency that will adopt from Liberia and Burundi. Turned out that that total list was 5.
Wow.
So we just said, okay, we're going to interview every single agency.
Yeah.
Who do we like? What's fitting? What's not fitting? And I think stuff has changed since then. But it basically came down to we liked two specific agencies. Both happened to be having a Burundian program, and the determining factor for us was, one said you are not allowed to bring your older child Bo. One said we were. And said, okay, well, it's important for us to bring Bo, so our decision is made for us. So it was kind of a neat story in the respect that filtering just really helped with the whole process.
Kind of led you right to the country and the adoption agency.
Exactly.
It really did. And I also want to just add on one thing. If you're looking to adopt and seeking out an agency, I would definitely tell you to call them and to have conversations with them. I know there was one agency that we had called, and we were like, oh, can you tell us about our program? And the guy was like, well, didn't you read about it online? Which put both of us off right away. And I was like, oh, that's how this relationship is going to go. Because unfortunately, it is a relationship. I mean, we've spent the last 3.5, almost 4 years in communication and relationship with our agency. So if I can only imagine if that had been our experience with someone who wasn't even, I don't want to say selling the program, but kind of telling us oh, this is why I love this. This is why I do this job. Yeah. I mean, it's a big thing. These are children's lives that you're dealing with, and you want to know that people are invested in getting them placed with, a good family. So I would definitely say make sure you're making those phone calls and kind of feeling out that relationship that you have with the people that you're talking to, because it's a long period of time that you're going to be dealing with them. So I feel like that's important.
Yeah.
And not to bring things to the financial side, but I mean, I think we'd be remiss not to talk about the finances. You also give them a lot of money. And thankfully, if it's a good program, a lot of that money is going to the programs in country to help. But there are lots of costs associated with adoption, and making sure that you feel innately comfortable with the agency and have a good relationship with them in order to give them a check for a lot of money is critically important. So.
Okay, so let's start to talk through, I guess, the steps. So once you now decided who was actually going to be walking through this with you, do you pay them up front? Then what are the next steps? I know there's a lot of paperwork. Just kind of describe some of the steps and when you had to pay certain things. And like any good financial podcast, we would always talk numbers. So we are going to go into all of that. And Trevor's the spreadsheets guy. So of course, he has all of these. So I think that'll give people a really good idea of kind of what you spend, what you can spend, but kind of walk us through the timing of, that beginning process and when you started to pay money. And then we'll summarize kind of the finances in a little bit.
Yeah, I think from the financial side, when you start paying money, it comes down to two primary, or actually I would say three primary big moments. Number one is the home study phase, which in our case, I'm trying to look at the spreadsheet right now. We started making payments to our home study agency because our international agency is not local here in Illinois. So we have to have a local home study agency prepare and complete our home study for us. But any of these agencies are going to have application fees that you pay right up front. So we're talking $300 to $500 just to say, hey, let's get in the door. Beyond that, you start paying different fees of home study completion fees and post placement reviews. But I'm looking at my spreadsheet right now, and I think most of our fees for the home study side of things, which was roughly about $4,000, was all paid within the first year. Okay. So we had our registration fee, we had a home study review, and a home study completion fee international. So all of that stuff added up, we paid that within the first year. That was about $4,000. Okay. So that was kind of the first big chunk, if you will. There are lots of little ancillary fees where you either need to go get apostilles done, or you need to go get fingerprinted, and you need to send courier information, stuff like that. Lots of little things here and there. But the next big one comes after you get matched. So we're basically in a process where you have your home study done.
And how long does that take?
I think that one is person dependent on how quickly you get your stuff done.
Okay.
I can tell you, after Trev and I made the decision that we were going to get started, and we kind of took quite a long time to actually get the paperwork done and get moving. It was one of those like, oh, this is a great idea and we are ready to go, but we are not really ready to sit down and actually figure out what we actually need to get done. So I know we started January of 2020, and we actually had just looked back that March of 2021 is when we actually officially got our home study, that it was finalized from our agency.
Okay.
But I would say that was probably a longer time that it took us. I know other families that have adopted from there, I'm sure, got theirs done way faster than we did. So that's kind of person dependent on how quickly you sit down and get through A to Z and get it all sent in and do what you're supposed to. So,
okay.
Yeah, I would say realistically, you could, if you were pushing hard, you were on the ball all the time, you could get your home study done within 3 months.
Okay.
So it's hard to do because a lot of it is dependent on your social worker coming out and visiting your home. So structuring and organizing those meetings, getting all of your education work done. We had to do a lot of education. And there are in-person education things, online education things, reading books, and whatnot. So it's hard to do, but if you give it your full attention, you could probably get it done in 3 months.
Okay.
So ours was, a year and 2 months. You could trim quality almost a year off of that.
Okay. All right. So home study's done, and then now is it more paperwork?
More paperwork.
Okay.
So now that you have your home study done, the next big step is to prepare and send a dossier. Okay. That's just a fancy word for a stack of documents, more or less. But get your dossier prepared and get that sent to your country where you're adopting from. I think our dossier, I forgot to look up how many documents, but I want to say it was 19 individual documents. And these documents range from letters of recommendation, there's a financial disclosure package, there is a benefits review, your home study is a part of that, there are passport photos, it's just very wide and a high breadth of documentation that they want. With that documentation, a lot of it has to be notarized, but since it's going in inter-country, you can't just rely on a notary. You also have to get it apostilled. Illinois is interesting because they are very stringent about their standards for completing notary documents. So even me, who I strive to work hard of, okay, what are these requirements that they need to go through to get all the details, this and that. I think the first time I went to go get a lot of documents apostilled, I got one document done. And I was like, okay, well, I just learned a bunch because even as frustrating as this moment is, I know what their requirements are now. So even though I just did all these documents, you know what, we're going to redo them. And there's a different fire in my belly to say, hey, let's go ahead and get this done. So yeah, we have all the apostille documents, and then you send them off to country, and then wait. There's a long waiting process. Simultaneously, while you're waiting for your documents to be reviewed, you're also sending information to USCIS. And I wish I knew what that acronym stands for. United States Citizens Immigration Service, maybe?
I think that's right.
But you basically send documentation off to them, and they send you back a letter and say you are approved to adopt a child that matches the criteria from your home study. So our case, we were matched or approved to adopt a child anywhere from 0 to 4 years old. So the country of Burundi could take that document and say, hey, we know when we do our matches, we know that we can match Courtney and Trevor with any child that meets these criteria that's between the ages of 0 and 4.
Okay.
So, there's a kind of in concert dance that happens that kind of goes through that.
I want to pause for just 1 second. I know this is not financially related, and
good.
neither is anything that I will say. But I do want to say, when you are looking to adopt, when you look into the country that you want to adopt from, a lot of times they will provide you with the specifics. So I'm only adding this because Trevor said we only had 0 to 4. For our country specifically, since our oldest son was, well, he was 3 when we started all of this. So they wouldn't let us adopt older than him. I guess they didn't look kindly on, or didn't think that it would go well to have him be our only child, which made him our oldest child. And then to adopt someone older for him, they want you to kind of keep that birth order. So ours always had to be a year younger than Bo and to like 0. And then also because of that, a lot of them won't let you pick a gender unless you're willing to adopt over a certain age. I think ours was 7. I think over 7 is when you could pick a gender. But since Bo is not 7 or older, we couldn't pick a gender either. So we didn't really have a say in gender. We also didn't have a say really in age. It just had to be younger than Bo. So when you're looking to adopt, you kind of have to figure out what your agency will allow. And I can't tell you for certain if those were our agency specifics or the country specifics. I can't really remember who made up those rules. But either way, those were rules that were made up for us.
Then after you did the paperwork, so you get all the documents received, accepted, so then you're waiting to hear back from Burundi.
Yep.
And then at that point, like was it a quick match, or is that even?
Nothing has been quick.
Yeah, it always takes time, and we were even talking about this after we got back, and there's part of us that's happy it took a little extra time to get done, because during that time, Burundi was actually refining their process. Prior to our adoption, it was really, even though they had a set schedule of, they had 12 of the last 3, it was really kind of all over the place of getting documents done, and the process needed to go through some serious refinement to get it honed out to make sure that these children truly are orphans, because you never want to step into a situation where you have a child that is matched for adoption, but then there's a family member that can take care of them, right? One of the things to keep in mind is adoption is exceptionally traumatic, and even though our son is 2.5 right now, we are fully aware that there's going to be areas of his life that's going to be really hard for him, and even though he may not have distinct direct memories of his caregivers or his orphanage, there's going to be a longing. There's going to be something there to say, hey, what's up with this, and how do I work through it? So if you have a family member that can step into that, sometimes it's a lot easier for the children. So that's why it's important to make sure that these children truly are orphans, because otherwise you don't want to get into the legal wrangling of that.
And that was a step in the process, right? Where they actually put something out to let anybody know, or to make sure that there's no family members, right?
Correct. And essentially that happened just at the tail end of the process. So we had actually already been matched. So if I backtrack a little bit here, we're sending the dossier, we're sending to USCIS all their documentation. and we get it all in. We're essentially in the waiting phase. And then I want to say it was 2 or 3 days before Christmas last year.
December 23rd. I remember we were thinking like this was the best Christmas present ever.
Right?
Yeah, so December 23rd of 2022 is when we got the news that we had been matched with Aiden. We had heard prior to that, and I think that was probably the hardest waiting time for me, is we had heard we had been matched in, I want to say, mid-November, maybe even earlier, and I'm like, you gave me a breadcrumb, but I can't go investigate. I can't go find out any more information. I'm just sitting, right? And that was really hard for me. But yeah, December 23rd is when we got the news for Aiden specifically. And so that was the next big timeline crunch. And then...
So that was 2022?
Correct.
December 23rd, 2022.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that was the day we actually first got a picture of him as well, which was really, really awesome. I know, like Trevor had said in November, they're like, we've matched you with a kid, and like, I just want to clarify, like that month is basically like, okay, so we just have a kid. Like, we didn't really have any specifics.
Yeah.
I think we maybe knew his name and his birthday. I think that was maybe the only things that we did know about him. And you know, this wait has been so long, so we're like, great, like we finally know we have like a little boy, like we know his name, we know how old he is, like that's so awesome. And then you spend all this time being like, but when do we get to even see what he looks like, or just anything about him, really. So it was probably at least a month and a half, I would say, that we waited until we got that picture. So we got the picture on December 23rd, which we were like, oh, this was so awesome. Like, what a great Christmas gift to finally be able to see him, to know, like, this is our son. Like, we were able to show Bo a picture of him, which was really awesome. I videotaped Bo, like, getting to see him for the first time, and he's, like, over the moon. He's so excited about having a brother.
Yeah.
But that wait was probably the most difficult, just knowing like, oh, you have a kid for us, a name, a birthday, and like we still don't know what he looks like or anything else.
Yeah. Oh, that's exciting. So then once you know, so then, okay, you're matched, but then what are you waiting on to then go pick him up?
Yeah, so right when we're matched, now you actually have to accept the referral, because just because you're matched with a child and they send you the referral doesn't mean that you accept the referral. Now we were very kind of open to many different things, and thankfully our adoption agency matched us with a child that met all of our criteria. We have heard stories where that isn't always the case, and it's really challenging and frustrating. So you unfortunately would have to turn down a match in those circumstances. But in our case, we knew we wanted to accept. Going back to the financial side, once we know that we wanted to accept the referral, that's when we paid out probably the biggest chunk of money to any particular agency person or whatnot. That's when we basically paid our acceptance referral packet fee. And I want to say that number was about just over $20,000.
Okay.
So that was a big check in January, February. But thankfully, this whole time, we're saving, we're planning. We know that this process is going to take this. So we basically we do the acceptance packet and get all that done, and then meanwhile, after you send the acceptance and that goes in the process, now you're kickstarting all the legal process in Burundi to say, hey, Courtney and Trevor are fully on board. Let's go through all the court dates that need to happen for Aiden to say, 1, he is truly an orphan. 2, Courtney and Trevor are eligible and willing to adopt him. And 3, we're going to put the 2 together, or I guess 3 together if that won't. That process basically took from January all the way up until right before we traveled, because there was a meeting, I want to say 2 weeks or maybe a week before. We had gotten in country and his passport had just been issued. But stuff happens really fast at the tail end. So.
Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, even just thinking about this timeline of events as they happen, and I mean, that's a lot. Along the way, did it kind of reassure you that, yes, we want to adopt and we're excited? So it just kind of made you more excited for it, but also just, I don't know, I think it almost like you're loving him like as you find out who he is. So I just think that just grows. So then when you meet him, I'm sure that was like a huge emotional,
I don't know if you have a different opinion about this. I know for me, I don't feel like it was ever a question that like we would step away from doing it once we started. I think we knew that we were like called to adopt from the beginning. So, and I know for me personally, and I know this is not most people, but like the waiting for me really wasn't that difficult. And I feel like too, because everything was a wait. So it was almost just like, okay, like when they tell us something, like it'll almost be like a surprise. Like I just had expected that it was just, I don't know, it almost just felt like it was always going to be like a lifelong waiting process. So like when they finally were like, oh, you're matched, we were like, what? Like we finally actually got matched. And especially because ours happened right before, I want to say it was either right before Thanksgiving that we got the information or right after. And then the picture around Christmas time. So to even think that they were doing this stuff around the holiday time, like I for sure wasn't expecting before the new year that we would have gotten any news whatsoever. And it's almost like you just don't even know what to expect on the timeline anyways.
Yeah.
So for me, I mean, it was a really, like you said, it's about 3.5 years. But I guess for me, I just always had that mindset of like, oh, well, everything has just been a wait. So when you finally tell us we can go, like, we'll be like, great, like, we're excited, we're ready to go, we've been waiting.
Yeah.
So that's me. I don't know if you had any other opposite feelings, but
No, I think for me is like this whole time we're praying and we're expecting, we're connecting, even though we don't know Aiden's name, we don't know what Aiden looks like. Like there's this emotional attachment that that there's this child for you, and every tidbit, little piece of information that you get that's closer to that, it's like, okay, hey, it makes it more real. That light at the end of the tunnel grows bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And for me, every little step actually encouraged me even more to say, hey, okay, we're getting closer. Oh, let's buckle down. Let's go. Let's buckle down. Let's go. So,
Yeah. No, I think, and the reason I was kind of asking that is because that's one of the biggest things that, yes, money helps you accomplish things that you want to in life. It helps pay for or buy things. But the most important part is that you're achieving and you're doing what you want to do. So if that's adopting a child, that's what's the most important thing to you. And the money that it takes to do that is just part of the process. And like, I think that so many times, like when we're working with clients, we're like, that is what's important. Yes, you're retiring, like, but the money will be that, like, you'll save for that to support that. So whatever that is. And so I think just really just making sure that people are, just thoughtful and mindful of like, this is what we want to accomplish. These are our dreams. These are our hopes. And we want to care for someone else and we want to adopt someone else into our family. So I just think like that really helps us to remember like why we do things, why we work, to be able to pay for the things that we have or want to do. So thanks for sharing that because, I think you didn't set this like really high bar of this is going to take a year and we're going to be done. Had you done that, I'm sure it would have been harder. Instead of, Courtney, you're saying, no, I knew it was going to take time and given the holidays. So you were almost like kind of setting this low bar in a sense. And then it was like surpassed.
I would say that is true. And also for us, the weird part is like God gave me this vision when I was 16 years old. But to think like when we started this, Aiden was not born yet. So to just know that like, I know for us, like I know God like created him for our family. Like we both can attest to the fact that he acclimated to our family very quickly. And it kind of feels like he's just always been a part of it. Like I don't feel like we've missed out on the last 2.5 years of his life. It just feels like he's just always been there, even though clearly we have. But just to see like that timeline of like, he was not even born when we started this. And then to see that he was born in the process. And then like, 2 years later, we were able to go get him. But just to see how that kind of has woven into our story of like, you really don't know what's for you. I mean, all the time. I mean, he was non-existent when this vision happened. I mean, like 20 years non-existent. Like,
that's crazy to think about. Yeah. No, that's a really good point. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. No, that's cool. I was just going to say, so kind of going through all that and recognizing that, hey, we finally got matched, right? And then in January, we finally accepted the referral. Now we're kickstarting everything specifically to Aiden and us of joining our family and whatnot. And I think there's more behind the scenes stuff that happens that we just don't see, which is frustrating, but it's one of those things that stuff is happening. So I think it was we had been given an expectation originally that we could travel in October. And then I want to say mid-July, maybe June?
They basically said it should take up to a year. So I think our expectation was like by December we should get to go get him. So for me, how I'm thinking is like, well, anytime sooner than December, like that's a plus. Like that's great. So
then, we essentially, in talks with our adoption agency, we essentially started bumping that date up sooner and sooner and sooner because they were being really efficient. And the in-country partners were absolutely wonderful in terms of how detailed and how quickly they were able to get things done. So we essentially got to travel in mid-September. Although I did, me being me, and the fact that I like to have plans set well ahead of time and to have flights booked and everything organized as well as I can, I pulled the trigger a little too fast. So I ended up having to change our flights. So that cost a pretty penny, but it is what it is. So we were able to travel September 19th. No, we got into country September 19th. We left on the 18th. So it was a long day of travel, both there and back.
It was not fun.
But so we got into country, and we were in Burundi for 2 weeks. We were in Kenya for 1 week, and then we came home.
Wow, yeah. And you stayed in Burundi because you had to stay there for 2 weeks, right, in his country. And then from that, you went to Kenya for passport things?
So, unfortunately, the embassy, at least what we're told, is the embassy in Burundi. So we were in the country of Burundi, the city of Bujumbura. The U.S. embassy in Burundi is located in Bujumbura, which is nice. But that embassy does not handle immigration visas.
Okay.
So Aiden actually came home on an immigration visa.
Okay.
However, I think, at least my understanding is because Aiden is our child legally, the moment he touched U.S. soil, he is also now a U.S. citizen.
Okay.
So there's a lot more paperwork. We're not completely done to get through that, but the reason we had to stop over in Kenya is to get his immigration visa, which Burundi didn't process. So
yeah, okay. So it's a process. So I think anybody that has adopted, like everybody has a different story, right? Yep. It was either faster or slower, or there were different things that came up. Yeah. And so hopefully this is encouraging to people that yes, it may take time, but you can work through all the steps, hopefully, as long as they're in place and there's guidance for here's what to do. So that's helpful. Okay, let's shift just a little bit before we kind of get to the wisdom you guys have now kind of like reflecting on this process. So let's talk finances. Trevor, I know you've got spreadsheets, probably spreadsheets upon spreadsheets. And it's funny because Courtney smiles too. So all of this know this about you, which is great. Let's talk about, just like total cost. So we're going to kind of talk through total cost to adopt that you guys had. We'll talk through, ways that you can decrease this, but also, it doesn't have to be this much. So we're going to kind of give all of those clarifiers. But just when you guys, through the whole adoption process, travel and everything, what did you spend total? Yeah,
so this may be sticker shock to some. I also want to remind folks that this was over a many year period, right? So it's not one big chunk of change that's sent out at one time, but I'm actually looking at the number right now, and I've documented everything that I can. If you want to see it, I'm happy to share it with anybody. But our number right now is $52,157. So that's a lot of money. But of that number, we have $17,000 was spent just on travel. So that's including flights, that's hotels, that's tips to drivers, tips to wait staff, pretty much anything we were doing in country, either in Burundi or Kenya. So that includes all of that. Beyond travel, I think the next biggest chunk were the agency fees to our international agency for handling the legal aspect and doing all the matching and stuff like that. So, about 52,000.
And for those, was that like 30 of the agency fees, pieces like that? Kind of the basic cost, would you say?
Yeah. So the big chunk for our international agency was 20.
Okay.
Was that one big check? But then there were are also additional other fees.
Okay.
And I want to say total fees to our agency. I want to say there were total agency fees otherwise were probably around 6,000. So somewhere between 25 and 30.
Okay. No, that's helpful because we kind of have like these big pieces that you spend money on, and I'll let you guys kind of talk through. I mean, you were even joking as we were just talking about this. You've never spent that much money like in a month ever. So, I mean, you also wanted to make sure that your family like had experience there. Yes. So experiences together. So you did things and saw things that you didn't have to. So just kind of talk us through, okay, it's a big cost. If you don't want people to be like, oh, you can't afford this. Talk us through some of the things that you guys did even early on to kind of help minimize some of these costs that you were paying out of pocket.
Yeah, I think at least from the travel aspect of our total travel budget, I wouldn't say budget because it was what it was. But of the $17,000 that we spend on travel, I would say if we tried hard, we could probably pull that number down closer to 10.
Okay.
The reality is, if you're going to another country, you're spending that amount of time there. Like, it's not as if you get to do that every day. So we want to spend time and money and resources to make the most of those experiences. Another thing to keep in mind too is, we were traveling at first with 3 people and then 4.
Yeah.
So if you are a family that you're not looking to travel with your other children, you're just looking to go pick up a child.
Yeah.
It can be substantially cheaper. So there's costs associated with that. But we had the opportunity to go up country in Burundi. So in a town called Gitega, which is actually the official capital of Burundi now, and got to see some wonderful sights. One of my favorites was the Burundian drummers, and just the collection of very sacred drummers in Burundi that they beat in unison, but in the way like you watch them drum, it's like it hits you in a so different way internally. It's just I just remembering right now, I can put myself right in that moment of just how we felt. So that was absolutely wonderful to go see. So stuff like that, other experiences and going to see and whatnot. In Kenya, we got to go on a safari for a day, which I would highly encourage anyone, if you go visit Kenya. I'd be surprised if you didn't plan to go on a safari, but make sure you go on a safari. And if you go in Kenya, we just did a single day trip, but going back, I would love to go for a multi-day trip. Yeah. So the boys would have to be older to do that. But
yeah. No. Okay. So Courtney, you're wearing your shirt that you guys had made, right? We all remember these.
These are, I think these are vintage now.
Yeah.
So we had decided to make T-shirts to try to raise money for the adoption, which I feel like this was a God story in and of itself as well, because I very much I am not like, I don't like to sell things to people. I am not a salesperson. I want nothing to do with it. And I feel like I was driving home in my car one day and I feel like God was like, the T-shirts aren't even about you. Like, they're not about you. Like, sell them so people can feel like they can support you and kind of be part of your village and be part of this journey with you. So I feel like because of that, I was like, fine, like, okay, we'll just give in and do that. So I actually created the logo part. And then Trevor went on a website and got them made. And then this was kind of a funny story because we got the first set of prints in and the font was too small. So Trevor reached back out to them and was like, hey, like this font is too small. Then we got a second set that the font was equally as small as the first.
They used the same print from the first round of orders on the second round of orders, which was supposed to be the corrective orders.
So by the third order, we finally got the right sized font on the shirts, but I don't even know how many T-shirts that end up giving us. We have still an abundance of them at home. But we were able to raise about, about 4,500, I think.
Yeah,
in total.
4,655 is the name.
So that's just one thing that you can do to raise money for an adoption. A lot of people, there's a ton of other ways you can do it. There's grants that you can even just Google that people are willing to give out money for adoption. I know fortunately for us, my work provides us with a pretty large sum of money for an adoption credit or a reimbursement. And then I think there's a tax credit.
Exactly, yes. Courtney's paying attention.
Courtney giving financial advice.
There is a federal tax credit for anyone going through the adoption process. And this is actually domestic or international. So there are some income thresholds that you have to be under. We are under those, so thankfully we should be able to get the full credit. So in 2023, that credit is just shy of $16,000. I want to say. So I want to say $15,950 is the number sticking in my mind. So all told, between the fundraising, between the federal tax credit, between the benefit that you're able to get through work, I mean, our true net cost is right now we're at 52, but we're going to come closer down to the 25, 26 mark. So it's one of those things that, is that still a lot of money? Absolutely, right? So this is why you absolutely have to be called in order to do this. But it's also a reminder that this is over a multi-year period, right? So it's not as if you're shelling out all these dollars right away, right at once. So you're able to budget for it and cash flow it accordingly.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's helpful. I think it kind of gives people like an idea of, okay, yes, there's costs, but there are the credits, things like this, like tax-wise and stuff. I think it's also a good point just to know, this is what we tell people all the time, but know what your employers provide as a benefit. So that's huge that, Courtney, through your employer, that you're able to get a credit for this, so, or reimbursement. That's huge. So as we kind of start to wrap up, I want you guys to like have a chance to kind of share anything like from your time there that you experienced there, maybe as you were meeting him, just anything that you want to, look back and remember. And then also just kind of wisdom that you would share with people that, are going to be going through this process, that are anything like that. I'll kind of give you the floor to.
I know for us, the first day that we got to meet Aiden, it was actually, I don't know what I was expecting, actually. But we basically went and we met the director of the orphanage, Bo, Trevor, and I. And then they basically just went and got Aiden and just like brought him to the room to us and was like, here he is. And
I will chime in. It's not as if it was a very sterile room. There was lots of furniture. There was stuff around. So it was a welcoming space, all things considered. So it wasn't like a very sterile, here you hand off, here's your child. But I think to your point, it was like in that moment they gave you full responsibility. Sorry, I don't mean to chime in there.
No, it's all good. And I know originally, and this is before we got to go meet him, I know we had thought that we would originally get to go like meet him at the orphanage, and then we kind of like would go back to the hotel, and then we'd kind of go back the next day and get to spend more time with him, kind of to get to know him like in his environment first before we just kind of swooped him out of there. But that is not what they do. And when we talked with our agency worker, she said, well, if you think about it, a lot of these kids are being prepared and being told that they have a family that's waiting for them. She said, so if you figure out like your family's coming and then like they're leaving and like they've already, unfortunately been abandoned in the first place. So she was like, that's why we have you go there and then you take them. So, I mean, it honestly, it doesn't sit well either way. It just it's traumatic regardless. I mean, you're taking them from everything they know, regardless if they now know that you're their family or not. Like that is their home. These are the people that have been taking care of them. And the situation, like the orphanages, I mean, a lot of it, they don't have a lot of resources there. But you can tell like the caregivers, like the kids are cared for. Like you can tell these caregivers love these kids and like they really give all that they can to take care of them. We had one woman that was, I think, particularly close to him, or, cared for him more than, some of the other caregivers. And so I know when we picked him up, like she was crying, and it was really just heartbreaking to watch, like, I know that in their heart, they really want these kids to have a better life, but to see that like you've invested like your heart and your emotions in caring for these kids, and then like now they're not there anymore. Like it's really kind of like a catch-22. Yeah. But I know for us, like that first day was just, I don't even know how to explain it, because we just like got him, and then it was kind of like, oh, like now we just went from like 1 to 2 kids in like a 5 minutes, even though it's been like 3.5 years. Like it just is like odd to even try to put the timeline in there. But we just basically picked him up from the orphanage. We sat him in the car, which I can tell you in Africa, they don't do car seats. They don't do nothing. Like Aiden could literally just sit in the front seat on Trevor's lap and like put his head out the window. And we joke because before we left, I had mentioned bringing a car seat. And he's like, what do you mean bringing a car seat? I'm like, I can't even leave my driveway here without getting in trouble for the kids being buckled in their car seat. Like, I can't even fathom them just getting to be like willy-nilly in the car. But that's how it was. But Aiden's super laid back and chill. So he kind of just was, I mean, he kind of just seemed like he was along from the ride from like day one, honestly.
That's great.
Yeah, it was one of those things that, I truly feel God's hand at work in this because of how easy and simple the transition really was. I think the words that I used when we left the orphanage is, it was just a beautifully hard moment, right? Yeah. That there's a lot of opportunity, there's a lot of love, there's so much going on in that one moment, and I'm so thankful to have our son, but I'm also kind of sad because of the love that he had there, and those caretakers. So it is good to know that we are staying in contact with some other families that are traveling. So as other children get adopted from this orphanage, one of our goals is how can we connect with those parents traveling too, so we can provide updates back to them, and just make sure that this is truly one big family. So that's kind of important. I would say in terms of other words of wisdom, if you're going through this process, make sure you connect with the families who have most recently traveled. And the reason for that is because, unfortunately, these processes change time and time and time and time again. Even when we landed in Burundi, I had probably the most stressful moment that I can remember, where there was a form that we needed to fill out. We were never informed of this form, never heard of this form, even though we had our visas prearranged, because yes, you can get your visas at the airport, but I wanted to make sure we had them ahead of time. So everything was a breeze. Well, this form had to be pre-completed, but it's not one of those declaration forms that you typically get on an airplane. This is a form you have to complete online. Never informed, never documented, never understood that we had to get this done. So I land in, or we land in country, get off the plane, our phones aren't working, even though our cell provider assured me multiple times that they would work, and we paid for the international plan. Everything would be just fine. They didn't work. Fine. Well, they have free Wi-Fi at the airport. However, you have such a new program that everybody that got off the plane, and another plane that landed 20 minutes after we did, scrambling to get onto this free Wi-Fi to fill out this registration form. And one of the things that I remembered in that moment is, even in the most difficult and stressful moments, there are always people to help. We had a moment where very few people spoke the language. Bo was very frustrated and tough. He needed to go to the bathroom. There were no bathrooms in sight. And I just felt helpless. And it was like, there is very little that I can do in this moment. And as I'm trying to complete these forms for our family, another lady actually was completing them as well. And she could tell that we were stressed. And I don't get stressed all that too easily. And she could tell that we were stressed. She stayed with me and helped complete the forms, because her phone, for whatever reason, was connecting to the Wi-Fi. So we got all those done. And the beautiful moment in that too is we were staying at the hotel. She happened to actually walk up to the hotel. We were eating dinner, and she said, "I don't know if you remember me," and I just lit up. I was so excited. I was like, "Thank you again, so very much," because it's just a reminder that no matter where you are in the world, there will always be people willing to help. And I think innately people are just kind and want to help and want to be encouraging to one another.
Yeah, no, it's great, because, Trevor, you're the person who's kind of like the worst case scenario, got to be prepared for everything. And so, I mean, even in this process, you're kind of like, I'm just, trusting, like, it's all going to work out. And which was kind of unlike you. Like, when you would say this, we're like, really? Because normally you're like, I got to have a plan. I got to be ready. So it is interesting. But even in spite of, like, not having a plan, or when you have a plan and something changes, it all still works out. It might cost a little bit more. It might take a little bit longer. So, like, yes, things happen that disrupt the plan sometimes, but it all works out. So, yeah. No, that's really cool. What would you say just to people? So now just kind of talking to people who are family, friends, trying to support people going through the adoption process, or as you come home, what are things that you would kind of tell them that, just from your perspective, that are helpful or aren't helpful, anything like that you want to share?
I know for me personally, I personally hate when people are like, "Oh, that's so nice of you," or like kind of act like we're like some kind of savior in a kind of way. I hate that. I hate that our son's story is built out of being abandoned and neglected. Like, I hate that for him. And I hate that people think that we're some kind of great people for doing this. Like I said, like, I was just called to adopt when I was 16. Like, I literally, the only thing that I have been in this, and Trevor along with me because he didn't have a choice, was basically just being obedient to what God was calling us to do. Like, I don't feel any kind of good way about it. I'm really, really grateful that God gave us this but also that he provided for us to be able to give Aiden a home and to give him a family, because he deserves that. As I feel like every kid does, like they didn't choose that life. So I know for me personally, I hate when people say that to me, or like, oh, that's so nice, or you guys are so great. Like I don't like hearing those compliments. Like, I just am really like blessed that he gets to be part of our family, because like Trev and I shared, like he kind of just seemed to be like a missing piece in our family anyways. And he so easily has like acclimated to our family and like just felt comfortable with us. And you can even just tell how he is with us. Like if I'm holding him and a stranger comes up to him and is kind of like talking to him in his face, you can kind of tell like, who's this stranger? And he kind of like almost like folds himself into Trevor. I kind of like, he knows that we're already his safe people. Yep. So that's just one thing for me. I don't know. I don't know if there's any really way around it, but I don't personally like the compliments, because honestly, like I really didn't do anything that great. I literally just followed the call that God put on my life. So, that's my own personal soapbox, because I just, I don't think it's necessary, but that's me. That's my...
Yeah, I would say for family and friends that want to support those in your life that are going through an adoption process, figure out what they need. Because some of that may be, hey, they need someone to vent to, of this paperwork process is taking forever. This person dropped it out. I messed this one up. This one's taking, it just is what it is. So sometimes we need to vent. Other times we need advice, right? And when it comes to travel related things, my dad was the first person I called and talked to. Say, hey, I'm running into this issue. What do you think about this? Let's chat through this to figure out what's going to make the most sense here going forward. Other people are able to provide resources, right? And we have so many people, friends and family, that have helped support us financially to be able to do this, because it is very expensive. It is very hard. But I think it's also just as important too to be praying for those families, friends and family that are going through this, as well as to when folks get back home, to make it easy, make the transition easy. And so many of our friends have just made the transition easy for us when we got home, in such a way that it didn't feel as if we need to re-explain all parts of the story, but they wanted to say, hey, how are we doing? What can we do to help? And some people just stepping in even before we asked to just do and take care of things. And we've had a number of friends do that. So.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
And to add on to that, I know for us, it was really nice. Our church actually had us come up on the stage and they prayed for us before we left. But they also kind of introduced Aiden in that, even though we weren't home with him yet, which was actually really great. So that when we got home, it wasn't like some big surprise that we all of a sudden showed up with another child at home. Because granted, we have a lot of, close friends at church that know we are adopting, but there's a lot of people that don't. And they all know Bo. Bo, just as we joke that he's just a pastor kid without pastor parents. He kind of runs the place. He is all over the place. Everybody knows who he is. But to have them kind of bring us up and pray for us, and then also for the church to see that like we're going to be coming home with another kid, just to kind of ease that transition and not having like a million questions when we got home, was actually really, really great. Because I know there's nothing more difficult than having one child that you're holding, the other one that wants something, and 7 million people wanting to talk to you and ask you about what you were doing and how you got another kid. So and I know for us, I felt like that was really nice for our church to even be thoughtful enough to have us come up there and do that, but also to kind of set us up well to return. So.
And I think the final thing I just want to share too is kind of a public shout out to all of the partners and employees here at FDS, because we're a small firm, but we're a small family too. And it's one of those things that say you recognize that when one of you is gone for a little while, it gets hard. But even though I was trying to stay kind of relatively in touch with certain things just to make sure things were not going on or not messing up while we were gone. It was one of those things that I saw so many times that so many other partners stepped into spots where were my responsibility, my things to do and take care of. And I can't thank Michelle. I can't thank Steve. I can't thank Rob. I can't thank Lisa. I can't thank Anna enough for all that everyone has done to help make this transition, this change, this adoption journey easy for me. So thank you guys.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's kind of like we knew like you needed to have that time, so it's like unless it's something huge, which there were some things, but you're back now, so that's good. But no, it's just stuff like that where you always know that like you're needed, but it's when you want to give people like this time and you're like, that's really important. And again, sure, money's important. Yes, it's needed to do things, but there are just times where like you have priorities in life too. And I think just something you guys have highlighted too is one of these things where it's like we all get to choose how we spend our money. So even when you think about your finances, it's not, I need to retire, so I have this much money because everyone says that you have to travel and do whatever. It's what you want. And so much of your finances are like, what is important to you? You don't have to retire at a certain date. It doesn't have to be at a certain time to do certain things. It's what you want, which is exactly what we help clients do, is to build it for you.
Yeah.
So I think this just really highlighted this because yes, while it's a lot of money, you've just said we choose to spend our money on this rather than a lot of other things that you can right now, but it's important to you. So these are the reasons why we help clients. Like it's a relationship where you just say, okay, this is what we want to help you do. So Thank you so much for sharing. I know this is like so much personal stuff too, where it's like a personal journey, and we're excited for your family too. Cause like you've said, like Aiden fits in so well. So it's fun that you're like a family of 4, and thank you guys for sharing.
It's been wonderful. So thank you for having us. And again, if anybody wants to chat about it in more detail, again, Courtney and I are both really open with all of this stuff. Happy to have a conversation. Feel free to email me. I don't know if we want to use the podcast email, but there's podcasts at financialdesignstudio.com, and you can get in touch with us that way. And happy to chat. But thank you for allowing us to share our story. So.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We appreciate it. We are advocates for adopting.
Yeah, exactly. I think you guys are a great resource too for people. So this is just helpful to know so much of the early process. And then, but there's other questions that come up. So it's nice that you guys now being champions for this are like, hey, we can help you and it's possible and it's exciting. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, one of the big things from today is that we want you to be sure to talk with your financial advisors about the things that are going on in your life that aren't financial too. Your finances should be planned to support the life that you want to live. So again, we've done a lot of episodes recently where we're talking about families creating your estate plan so that you can have a successful process when that's needed and so that your family and these relationships stay strong. So again, you can listen to episode 24 where we talk about managing your aging parents' finances. That's an example of one of these episodes. But for today, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time on the podcast.
Thanks for listening. To find any links or resources related to this episode, check out our show notes. Your host was Michelle Smallenberger, a certified financial planner and CEO. The guests featured are from Financial Design Studio, a team of experienced, fiduciary, fee-only advisors based in Chicago. Anna Lewis is the executive producer of the Behind the Designs podcast. And as always, for more information about Financial Design Studio and who we are, check out our website, financialdesignstudio.com. And final note, no content discussed on this podcast should be taken as financial advice. Financial Design Studio accepts no responsibility for your individual choices. We'll see you in the next episode.